Continuing on my challenge for this year to paint something from my pile of opportunity, especially the older models, I found my Wreck Age collection. Some nice post-apocalyptic figures from an RPG that was kickstarted, and well, I haven't heard from them since, and I only got these on eBay, not the original Kickstarter. This one specifically caught my attention because it reminds me of the good faction from Mad Max 2. And it's that hockey armour that really kind of points in that direction. And this is probably a deliberate aesthetic choice in the sculpting, and equally as deliberately I want to lean that way with my painting. The costumes from Mad Max 2 included a lot of cream rather than pure white. There's some greeny white and some browny white and some pink and yellow and blue hidden away in there as well, so I'm pretty free to include some desaturated earthy colours as much as I like. Now conveniently, or maybe not, a few years ago when I first got this model, I gave it a Zenithal Prime. That was the fashion at the time. And that might just give me the armour without actually needing to put much effort into it at all. Or maybe that would trap me. We shall find out later on in the video. I will start by painting this model in purple. Purple? Stay with me, it'll make sense in a bit. With such paleness planned for the clothing, I wanted a darker and richer skin tone to contrast it. And without a specific darker skin tone paint in my collection, I made my own, with some dark brown mixed with some purple. Very commonly, reds are an important pigment to include in any kind of human skin tone, as human blood is red, usually, and the skin is somewhat translucent, no matter what type of skin you're looking at. But for darker skin tones especially, a touch of blue really goes a long way. I actually only base coated the skin at this step, and then I kind of worked on some of those desaturated tones I wanted for the clothing. I was halfway using my swamp palette technique in this particular model, and so I mixed in some green with my skin base coat, and I used that murky green for any of the Under Armour clothing that was visible and that I could reach easily. I added a little light brown into the mix as well, and I picked out all of the belts and the backing piece for the armour, but I was very careful not to get any on the armour itself, leaving that Zenithal Prime in place. I started going back and forth over a lot of these features, adding in some highlights here and some shadows there, and mixing in various paints into my swamp, as I've shown in a previous video. I found I was fussing a lot over these minor features instead of dealing with the main focus of the model, the armour. With the Zenithal being a nice grey to white directional highlight, I could just leave it alone and call it done, except it really did just look like a primer layer to my eyes. I quickly came to the conclusion that I would have to do something on top of the Zenithal, and so I started to work with some of the more obvious techniques that I could come up with. A dark black panel line is going to separate the features of the armour, each of those little pieces. I stippled on some black and brown to make some texture in the shadows, but also to add some dirt and grime to it. And I even edge highlighted a pure white over the top edges to really emphasize that lighting effect and to define the shape of each armour piece. And this really did help a lot, except it just doesn't feel like I've done anything. It's still kind of, to my own eyes, looks like the primer. I went back around the model and kind of busied myself to kind of trick myself into not concentrating on the armour. So I went over the browns and greens again, adding in even more shading and lining, especially to separate the colours. I realised I hadn't painted the skin really, I base coated it before, and so I worked on that. I added a tiny amount of a Caucasian paint into my purple brown mix, which now actually had a lot of other pigments in it due to my swamp technique. I tried to be careful and paint in the skin tone as subtly as I could, so that I could create the definition I would like without going too bright with the highlight colours. And I realised I was just about happy with everything about the model, except for that armour, and so I went back again. I added more texture from stippling, and I ensured the edges of the white were clearly defined, both in hue and in kind of just generally neat painting, but nothing I did made me happy with the white armour. I feel like there's something missing about it. I could glaze some pale blue or green over it, and that would match the film I'm referencing, kind of those very subtle off-white colours. But I wanted the model to have white armour, and so I wasn't 100% about doing that. Again, to try and trick my own eyes, I wanted to finish off everything else about the model, so I got the base painted. And I dragged out all of my other Wasteland models, realising they all have slightly different basing scheme, but I can actually repaint them really easily so that they all match. For my Wasteland models, I've kind of settled on a very dark colour, any dark colour, dry brushed with ochre, and then a tan base rim. Super simple, really easy, and it works for everyone. And if there's some rocks or metalwork, they can be kind of different colours as well to add a bit more interest. And so there is the model done as it is now. White armour, desaturated colours for the rest of the clothing, and a darker skin tone than I usually paint. My eyes still even now have just that slight trick of feeling where it just looks like the armour is painted in the primer colour, even though I've put some work into painting it. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the armour. Is it okay as it is? I kind of think it is. Also, as a quick side note, a point of discussion about my challenge for this year, I have ticked off a third month now, because last month I painted up some German models for Bolt Action. Now, I could say that I painted 12 Germans, one for each month of the year, and call my year complete, but no, I'm just going to count that set as a single entry for 1 month, and my little Wastelander is my third month. What in your collection are you going to pull out and paint? I will be checking in on my next video for this series to ask if you painted it, and oh yes, for the one person who watched my first video and commented on the Pirate Orc actually, did you complete your challenge? I'm sure you did. Anyway, look forward to my next video of the series where I paint another something old from my pile of opportunity. But for now, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.